Welcome to this first session of UK Prop Fest. My name is Matthew Battle, and it's really good news that you can join us this morning. We're based in the club room, which you can probably see around me. You can even see a black tie, which is in preparation for this evening. So that's the type of event we're running. We're running for the big awards tonight, and it should be very exciting. And the club room, of course, is at Bicester Heritage, and there's more about that as we go on, and we will have some more information on that. It is a sumptuous venue though. So first of all, just a bit of housekeeping. As ever with this wonderful world of internet, we have a slight issue. Unfortunately, we're trying to get one of our speakers online, which is Nick Patterson-Neal from Barton Willmore. We're still working on that, and we'll try and resolve that, but bear with us, but we'll come back to you on that. But we have everybody else, which is good news, and I will introduce them all to you in a minute. Anyway, a bit of preface, and it's quite important really. Over the next 2 days, we've got 6 sessions covering burning issues across the Arc and the Thames Valley regions. When myself and my colleague Hugh started to organise this event, we did not envisage that there would be so much content, so much change, and so much to talk about. But it looks like with almost 500 or 600 registrations, there's other people out there with similar views. That is the number of people who booked up over the next couple of days. We've also tried to make the content relevant to the regions around London. In other words, as a group, we passionately believe that the dynamics of the Arc and Thames Valley region are different, very different, and I think that should be celebrated. Thanks firstly to our sponsors, Barton Willmore, Janssens, SEGRO and Stantec, for helping us to make this happen today, and also for giving us support with the UK Prop Fest webinar. Okay, so let's put some context on today. On past events which we've organised, we have spoken about the innovation and collaboration as some holy grail or impossible elixir. But actually, the past 5 months of hell have focused people's attention and importance on these issues. How are the regions and the Arc and the Thames Valley leading this debate? Do the universities have a key role? What can businesses do to get involved in this elusive world of collaboration and innovation? Finally, and I think most importantly, and an area which is sometimes difficult to pinpoint, what is the property story behind this issue? And can investment in infrastructure help and encourage development, collaboration? As ever, so many questions, so little time. What we'll do now is introduce each of the speakers, and we will now test their skills at using our tools, so our video tools. So if I could call in no particular order, first of all, and I'll just turn off my screen, Dr. David Prout, are you there? David, are you able to turn on your screen? Excellent. There we go. Great. Can you hear us, David?
I can hear you. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay, great. I'll just stick with you for a minute because the joys of modern technology. I'm just enjoying this moment, and the last 30 minutes, if you can see us running around, this is a wonderful moment. So let's just enjoy that. David, it's very good to have you here. Your role, of course, is Pro Vice Chancellor, Planning and Resources at the University of Oxford. Just before we come on to the questions, I introduce everybody else. Could you just explain what that role involves, and also just briefly why innovation and collaboration is so important to you in that role?
Thank you, Matthew. So my role covers the resource allocation within the university, the Oxford University estate, and the capital planning, together with a whole raft of other things around the university's strategic plan, the sustainability strategy, and chairmanship of large number of university committees and participation in a large number of Oxford University trusts and collaborations.
Okay, that's very helpful. And we'll now come on to our next speaker. If you could come online, Alistair Lomax, are you there?
Hello. Hi, Matthew.
Fantastic.
So yes, I'm Alistair Lomax, and I'm director of the ARC Universities Group, which is a self-organised group of all the universities between Oxford and Cambridge, and there are 10. And I think Oxford played a very strong role in the setting up. And David, you were at the first meeting with all the vice chancellors in Whitehall in 2018. It was our first formal meeting with MHCLG, talking about where we might go. And just to give you some idea of the scale here, of the 110 billion GVA delivered by the ARC, 13 billion of that is accountable to the university activity directly and indirectly. They generate 2 billion of research, the lion's share with Oxford and Cambridge, and some with Cranfield in the middle. And the turnover of those institutions is 5 billion. So they are like beacons along the ARC, playing a major role. And they are also very diverse. So we know Oxford and Cambridge with their world-class and preeminent position in research. But actually we've got the Open University, which has been doing so much with online learning during COVID, with its presence in all 4 UK nations.
Oh, now, Alistair, we've suddenly lost you. Are you still there? Did you press the wrong button, or did you go and get coffee from the kitchen behind you? Alistair, you there? You might have to dial in. Okay, let's go on to, I think Alistair's just dialed back in. I'll tell you what, let's go on to Emma. Do you want to join us? Do you want to turn on your video, Emma?
I can, that you can only have 3 people at one time.
Okay, what I'll do mine is just right. Okay, Alistair, welcome back. We're going to go on to Emma.
Very good. Okay, I'll switch off.
Yeah, that's okay. You stay there. Yeah. Okay, Emma, do you want to come back on?
Thank you, Matthew. So
Yeah,
I am Emma Southwell-Sander. I run the Harwell Energy Tech Cluster. I work for the Science Technology Facilities Council at Harwell. And we have a collaboration and initiative through the Energy Tech Cluster with Harwell Campus and Brookfield, who have just joined us at Harwell. So we collaborate by, we have 57 organisations on site that work in energy at Harwell, over 100 in our wider network. And we collaborate very closely to encourage disruptive net zero technology, innovation, and bringing that through the Science Council and our project work to line up with what's happening across the site in construction. So as you know, I'm sure you know, the Natural History Museum is moving to Harwell, the Quantum Computing Centre, we have the Vaccine Manufacturing Innovation Centre. So all of these projects can be tied very closely into looking at renewable energy, the data streams that come out of some of the renewable energy systems. So looking at energy use across the buildings, across the site. So you know, energy storage, PV on the roofs. I can go into more detail later, but it's basically moving everyone forward as a group, gains much more momentum than doing it individually.
You're on mute, Matthew. Matthew, I think you were on mute just then, so I didn't hear what you said.
That's it. And if you could join us, Alistair. Okay, right, there we go. We've got all 3 of you now. Now, the issues for me are a couple of things. Just before, a bit of housekeeping. One is we've got a poll going, which looks, the first poll was quite interesting, about leadership does does the ARC region need better or different leadership? And it looks as if interestingly, I'm surprised actually. I think the local, keep as it is, local councils, LEPs, etc. That's very interesting. I must admit that was my final question. I wasn't sure whether that's going to stick, but that just shows the support out there, which is interesting. The other thing is, obviously, we also have a chat on the right-hand side. Again, is there any questions there? And please do come through to the three speakers today. And we'll put another poll in a minute. And the other thing is we're trying to still get Nick Patterson-Neil online. Very frustrating, but we will try. If we can get him in, we'll obviously patch him in from Barton Wilmore. So the first question, really, and I think it's really an extension of what you've explained your roles is really, but and I guess it's obvious. I guess most obviously it goes to David really to start off with. The university has placed itself at the centre of the race to find a cure for COVID-19. How important is a culture of innovation and collaboration in the search for obviously this vaccine, but also for the university in general?
Look, I'm not an academic, so I'm not speaking from an academic point of view. But I think there are certain features of the way that Oxford University operates, which means that it is incredibly well suited to rising to challenges such as the search for a new vaccine for a new disease. I thought I might just say a little bit about Oxford and then a little bit about how an innovation culture is grown at Oxford. And I think that is really what informs the way in which Oxford has started to develop a potential vaccine for COVID. She's not a gigantic university in terms of numbers of people. You know, we have the graduates in round figures, 10,000 undergraduates, 10,000 postgraduates, and about 20,000 staff. And that compares to a university like Manchester, which might have, 40 or 50,000 students. Oxford Brookes has 20,000 students. So in terms of numbers of students, we are not huge. Our turnover is 1.8 billion a year, of which about 800 million is in research. And I think that's a huge difference between Oxford and many other universities, the sheer amount of research that we do. And we have the biggest research budget of any university in Europe. There are 70 departments at Oxford, 39 colleges, 5 museums, 102 libraries, about 250 university buildings, and at least as many college buildings in addition to that. So it is a very, very rich ecosystem within which our academics are working. And it is an incredibly old institution. And I guess that many old institutions become very, very sclerotic. So the question, I think, is how does Oxford not become sclerotic? And that is to do with the fact that it is an evolved institution, that the governance is bottom up, that in line with classical theories of devolution, decisions are taken at the most appropriate level. So although the university takes decisions on things like exam standards or taking out a many £100 million bond, it's the individual decisions of academics that lead the curiosity-driven research that is a great feature of Oxford University. And one of the distinctive features of Oxford is the amount of time that our academics have for research. They, of course, do a lot of teaching, but in comparison to other universities, are able to devote a huge amount of time to research. And many, many Oxford academics do no teaching at all. They are purely research academics. Now, the team that has developed the vaccine had in fact been working on this kind of vaccine for a very long time. And when it became apparent that COVID was going to be a problem, they immediately got going to see how they could adapt their existing vaccines to tackle the new challenge. And the university was able to underwrite their first endeavours with £1 million underwrite for their research. But then soon after we did that, money started pouring in order to help them with their research. So the key feature of Oxford, I think, in terms of an innovation ecosystem is this devolved governance and the initiative resting in the hands of numerous different academics right across the university.
Okay, that's really interesting. I think this idea of innovation culture is really key and absolutely fascinating. And also, I learned a new word, which was sclerotic, which is great. It's very important to have these little triumphs each day. Could you just explain exactly what that word means to the?
It means that everything gets very kind of congested and difficult to sort of to get through. So I think it's actually a medical term, sclerotic, to do with the way the blood functions, but it means very, very kind of sticky, difficult environment.
Okay, absolutely fascinating. Obviously, in this environment we're in at the moment, that's a key issue. Thank you for that. Slight digress. Alistair, just to look at that university's discussion, and obviously there's I mentioned the University of Oxford because it's topical at the moment and it's part of the debate, but the universities across the arc, is there a collaboration culture, and how would you just philosophically define that? Is it something which is a bit unreal, or is it real?
No, it's absolutely real, and I think it's quite well established. And certainly the way that research funding has been disseminated or distributed for a while has encouraged collaboration and insisted on collaboration. But you find that and David, the cited the role of the academic, and I think at Oxford and Cambridge, it's the academics' work which is really important, and the idea that people might actually be working in affiliation with their research group across universities, and certainly in Oxford and Cambridge case, internationally. So and that enables us to draw on solutions and people who might hold the absolute gem of kind of world-class expertise in a different area. And I think just to cite one individually, and Emma will know this well, the power or propulsion and energy expertise which there is in Oxford, if we can combine that with the kind of impetus from government to reach carbon zero aviation by 2050, and respond to that by drawing in the capabilities in Cranfield and the research airport there, with also the work that's going on in the Whittle Lab in Cambridge. And if you draw those together under the aegis of the ARC, then the future is really exciting. And there's an amazing culture of collaboration. I think this is based on a long development of funding and culture, and it's very deep. And I think it's that those involved in this particular initiative are, I think everyone's respectful that is owned by the academics, and if they're not engaged, then it can't move forward.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you. And Emma, you saw that, yeah. What's your view? And I suppose sort of supplementary question would be about clusters. If we could kind of lead into that, there's obviously, Harwell's USP, but how important is a innovation and culture at Harwell? And I guess also another supplementary question, how important is it you're in Oxfordshire? Could you be anywhere?
So I would completely agree with what's been said so far. I think it's really important for us that the strength behind our ecosystem at Harwell is that we link very closely to the universities, across academia, to government, to industry, to finance. We're in Oxford and Oxfordshire, so contributing to the list, working closely with Oxlep, Oxford County Council, organisations like Advanced Oxford, that are really looking at the whole region, clusters around the region, and how we strengthen that. But we're also a UK asset, so reaching out across the Arc to Cambridge, to universities, throughout the country. So this week I've been in meetings with energy initiatives Northwest, in the Northeast, using our expertise at Harwell. So we've just, under UKRI, we have the different councils that have been brought in. So a good project around innovation is our work on ammonia. So EPSRC have just funded our green ammonia demonstrator for the next 18 months. We have Oxford University, Nottingham coming in to run a research programme with that. We're also taking it to private industry, and so looking at a project with Reaction Engines recently through the Science Technology Facilities Council, looking at ammonia as a zero carbon emission fuel for flight. So all of that innovation, and we couldn't do it without the collaboration behind us. The innovation is absolutely key, and so is the funding. So looking at the councils for funding innovative projects, but also looking to partners in industry. I've been working with companies like BP who are really moving towards renewable energy and net zero technology, and trying to access some of those funds to bring it in so that we have a joint effort, all moving forward together. And obviously key to that is construction and making sure that we have the buildings, the facilities, the equipment. What's going to be so key to energy moving forward is all of the data integration, the data streaming, how that's managed, looking at AI, remote applications for building management, site management. It is all absolutely vital for us to be able to move forward as an energy tech cluster, looking at all of the disruptive and net zero technologies that are on our radar at the moment.
Okay, that's really interesting. It's quite a broad remit. Just looking at Harwell, how dependent is this discussion about clustering on government involvement and intervention? Or do you think clusters can evolve without government, whatever government whichever government is investing?
I think that we definitely need to feed up to government about where the direction of the net zero technologies and the innovation and the science that are coming through. And again, it needs to go both ways. So communicating coming down. So a recent initiative is the Brunel Challenge that we've been looking at, which is fantastic because that's come through the high value manufacturing catapult. And that's really looking at the science and moving it up through the TRL levels. So we're starting off with our science, with our research and development, moving that up through to innovation, engineering. At Harwell, we have a living laboratory initiative. So we want that to be a UK asset to test and validate the technology on our site. And Brookfield and the property arm of Harwell campus can really support that with innovation across the site and through the buildings, which we want to be able to build these products up, keep them in the UK, and take them all the way through to commercialization.
Okay, that's very interesting. And Alistair, what's your view on this idea of clusters? Is that something the ARC is encouraging, and how can you encourage clusters?
Well, I think if you think about the role of government already in the ARC, and David will know government much better than me from your background, but there are 5 different departments involved. So already we have a kind of holistic parentage of the ARC, and the clusters are magnificent and need to be. They will go anyway, but we can accelerate them, and I think there's a need to do that in where we are as a country. You know, we're coming through COVID. We've got Brexit. How are we going to use those potential clusters to really capitalise on the opportunities and overcome some of the threats? And I think the government has been asking the ARC partners. I was interested actually in the poll that's saying that the leadership should stay as it is, and I think we've moved forward massively over the last year or so. This has been a long time in gestation, but government has been asking for one joined up ask, one joined up approach. And it's complex. There are many different partners, and they each have their particular strengths and their areas of interest. But I think people are working very well together, and so there's that meeting of what is possible with the governance, with the thrust from government, with hopefully the support coming through, and I think we have serious clusters. I mean, and there are three in particular, which there's the energy and future mobility, but the sustainable flight and aviation. I'm interested in the ammonia, Emma, and where that could go. The work that is going on in space innovation, disruptive innovation, for example, and life sciences. These are massive projects which will reinforce a kind of reinvigoration of our competitive spirit. And I think that we'll look back on this time. It's been difficult, it's been full of challenges, but we started off talking about the work that Oxford is doing on the vaccine, and how that's, you know, you've built something which has been there and been absolutely ready for that kind of thing over many centuries. But we'll look on this as a golden period. Don't quite know where it will go, but clusters absolutely, and they are there.
Okay.
The one that is more difficult to pin down, but is actually really important, is digital and creative industries, with Pinewood, with game production, and I think it's easier. The harder the science, the easier it is to pinpoint the direction and to corral all the different moving parts.
Okay, that's very interesting. I think it is tricky, such a wide area of the art, to put some definition on that. Alistair, David, just you'll be pleased to know that I've got from your colleague Alistair Corey. He has given me an exact definition of sclerotic, which is becoming rigid and unresponsive, losing the ability to adapt. Sclerotic. There we go. So there we go. And you'll be also pleased to know that Ravi, sclerosis, medical abnormal hardening of body tissue using nerve cells. So I actually think you covered all the bases, David. As ever, you're giving the breadth, which is what we need. So interestingly, I've also got a question here, David, if I could just come back to you, which is interesting that the ARC is defined by a physical location, but isn't the present search for a COVID-19 vaccine big enough to open the research to other UK contributors? That's from John Rushton. What's your view, just talking about, again, this idea of clusters and the university and its ability to spread that sort of knowledge base?
Yeah, I wanted to say something about collaboration and clusters in response to the previous discussion. In terms of collaboration, the really remarkable thing, am I still? Yeah, I'm still there. Yeah. The really remarkable thing about the Oxford vaccine development is the global collaboration that sits behind it. You know, our academics have the most phenomenal networks, global networks, and these are networks forged over many years. Often they will be DPhil or postdoc students that have worked with our academics who have then gone to work in different parts of the world. There'll be people that they've done research projects with previously. So within really within weeks of this virus becoming apparent, our teams were in touch with teams in China, trying to understand what was going on there. As soon as we had a vaccine that could be tested on people, we were able to set up trials in China and in Vietnam through our collaborative work. The problem in China and Vietnam is that the disease receded too quickly. So there was kind of no point carrying out trials there because there weren't enough infected people. But then we were able to move into Kenya, where we have a big research project, and now we're very, very active in both Brazil and America. So in terms of collaboration, the Oxford vaccine collaboration is a global collaboration, and I don't know the details of what discussions have happened between Oxford and other universities, but I'm absolutely certain that there will be a huge amount on that. I noticed that the lead researcher, Sarah Gardner, is on the Life Scientific tonight on Radio 4, if you want to get the inside story. So you can hear her this evening on the radio. Just in terms of clusters, I mean, clusters are such a sort of very, very well-known phenomenon, aren't they? And I guess Oxford University is an academic cluster. You can identify other clusters, really well-known ones at Hatton Garden or historic ones in Spitalfields or whatever. So clustering is a well-known phenomenon. And I think the problem for government really is how it works with human behavior to sort of reinforce it. So that government always has a choice really about whether it spreads the jam thinly, and there's a huge amount of pressure for jam spreading. Everybody gets the same wherever they are, or whether it actually backs existing areas of excellence and so on. And that tension within government between investing in communities that have been left behind versus investing in communities where there are centres of excellence is a really huge issue for government, which it's constantly wrestling with. And I think the other thing about clusters and about government intervention is, in my opening comments, I said, innovation was at Oxford anyway, is driven by sort of a devolved governance and a very, very devolved leadership throughout the institution. Government tends to be head in the opposite direction. It tends to want to do really big things, and so put £500 million into something. But there's a tension between that kind of agglomeration of help and a devolved innovative model. And I think that's another genuine tension which there isn't a right answer to. It's just really, really important to recognize the tensions is there when taking decisions about government spending.
Okay, that's great. It's very helpful. And just to bring it back down to property, and maybe David, just to follow on from that, I think, at Harwell, we've got a very clear view of what property offer looks like from clustering. What's your view on that moving forward? And I know anecdotally we've spoken about here east in the Docklands at Stratford. What do you see as examples where, from a physical point of view, where collaboration could be encouraged? We've talked about it more from a philosophical point of view, but bring it back down now to nuts and bolts in terms of property. What's your kind of perception or your image of that?
So I think there are two things really. One is location, and the other is facilities. And of course, Harwell has some fantastic national facilities. You can create clusters in sort of unlikely locations, but I think their critical mass is absolutely essential. So here East actually is on the edge of the Olympic Park rather than in Docklands, and it's quite a big facility, and it's proposed to enlarge it still further. But I think if it stayed sort of the size it is at the moment, it probably wouldn't be a huge success. And I think that's an issue in Oxford as well, because we have wonderful facilities in the centre of Oxford, but we have no spare land. We have land thanks to the decisions of the planning authority sort of on the edge of Oxford, but of course that's not where the facilities are. And you've got Alistair Corey on the call. You know, Begbroke, the thing we're struggling with at Begbroke is how to increase the size of Begbroke in order to make it a more attractive location for companies to locate at. There's huge demand for what we've got, but I think that Begbroke would be much more successful if we could quadruple or quintuple its size. And that's why we have our JV with Legal and General, which has set aside £4 billion over 10 years for investment in Oxford, because they have got the scale and capacity to build out an area like Begbroke. And we're working hard with them at the moment on the business model for how we could do that.
Okay, very interesting. Emma, from your point of view, there's obviously successes there in terms of the leases, perhaps, or just the way the buildings are designed. I don't know. Perhaps you can explain a bit more how some of the approach to the property offer works with your friends.
I think one of the main aims of Harwell Campus is to be inclusive and make sure that you also have this atmosphere there where everyone is included, everyone has something to contribute. I know that we particularly focus on certain clusters because the science behind that links into the facilities. So obviously we've got Diamond, ISIS, Central Laser Facility, Research Complex. The Space Cluster has been going for about 10 years and is now over 110 organisations. Health and Energy are in the high 50s and they've been going only for a few years. So making sure that it's inclusive and we stick to our areas. We're also talking about a digital cluster, that's really going to be across all of the sectors and other groups to focus on moving forward. And in regards to the building, that's reflected. So when we were going to the Natural History Museum, all of the cluster managers were there. We had scientists there meeting their scientists, talking about projects in innovation that we could really expand in the facilities. And key to that is that we have some space. There are over 700 acres at Harwell. It's a unique site because it's owned and managed by the joint venture. So those decisions can quite quickly be run through the board there, all of whom have a fantastic background either in property, government, academia. They're specialist sectors in regard to the science. So pulling in those whole groups together is key, and then working closely with organisations that are looking at Harwell as a location to make sure that the building and the architecture of the building and is included in the way that they want to go. With energy, we have a sustainability working group at Harwell Campus, and that's all about discussing what construction processes we can look at, what renewable energy we can look at. I've already mentioned the data, how we can make that as streamlined as possible and in regards to energy. And really bring the campus up and continue to move it forward as more organisations look at moving there. And I think key to this as well is a lot of it as around the communications. So making sure that those messages get out across all of the different groups that we collaborate with. And in particular, being involved in property forums like this, because we want to get feedback from the community. Brookfield have a history of, a lot of construction projects behind them and have learned, what construction processes facilitate net zero targets where we can lower carbon emissions. And so we're really looking forward to sharing that information across the campus and with our partners and wider networks about how the whole industry can move forward.
Yeah, just to interrupt, sorry to interrupt there, but and I think this idea of partnership is key, because I think obviously one of the issues about Harwell is that you embrace partnership, and I think that's really quite exciting. However, I just wanted to ask, do you have a very flexible arrangement with leases, or how do you get over some of this issue about startup companies, and you don't always know from their accounts how their covenants are? So, and there's a degree of, I guess the word is faith, but faith and property sometimes are not easy bedfellows.
So we're very flexible. We have a real mixture of different contractual arrangements. We have startups through SMEs to multinationals, and so it will depend on how large the company is, the financial backing behind them, how many staff they have, whether they're just looking at office space or laboratory space too. And we share, especially the smaller organisations, across the private side of the campus and the Science Council. So with the startups, we'll look to take them more often than not into the Science Council or the RAL piece of the site, where we'll really foster incubation, make sure that they have, you know, any services available to them that we can help to provide, whether that's looking at accounting, contracts, tax, whether we can share our equipment with them, give them access to expertise with the scientists. So we have a very low failure rate to date. We don't know, we're still waiting to see the impact of COVID. But I you know, it's been a very, very high success rate so far. And then when the company gets large enough, we say, okay, time to speak to Harwell campus and to move out and to look at some of these on the private side.
Okay, that's very interesting. We'll come back to about this issue about how people are reacting to COVID-19 and the use of the office space in a minute. However, Alistair, I just wondered on the polls if you could also comment about this issue of leadership, because interestingly, about the ARC leadership and your views on that. Interesting, yeah, keep as it is obviously effective, so that's good news. But I'm just wondering what your views were, and also this idea of where property fits within the ARC discussion.
Okay, so quite a lot in that. I mean, there was a David mentioned in the chat about government needing to take the lead. They will anyway, and I agree with that. And I think there's whatever happens with local delivery. So it's a question of the local politicians and the LEPs are like the academics in this. They have the local knowledge and they have the relationships, and so yes, that's right that they have a very active role in this. But we do need something to tie it together. And actually, when the LEPs were asked for shovel-ready projects by the Chancellor in, I think it was June or July, and each of the boards is accountable to a different, each of the teams is accountable to a different group of trustees. So I think we need something different that ties everything together. The thing that I hear is that some of the spin-outs from Oxford and Cambridge have been so successful and they reach a certain position where the difficulty is in scaling them up, and how do we keep them and all the benefits that they bring with them in the region. And I think that the understanding that a little more, and that trajectory. I mean, there's been explosive growth over the last few years coming out of these great institutions in startups and some real unicorn companies. But how do we, and with Brexit, we need to do a little bit more on that maybe, but how do we use some of the former Air Force bases and the land that was laid down as an investment proposition by Corpus Christi in 500 years ago, in the middle of the ARC? There are great swathes of land that could be activated, and I think to do that in a kind of organised way to get this idea of David's idea of critical mass, would be very sensible. Seen some interesting work with the enterprise zones and enterprise zone companies, where incentives can be brought forward to build out the infrastructure, and this has happened in Silverstone very effectively. But I think I'd be interested in how there's more critical mass and activity, not in the kind of overcrowded areas around Oxford and Cambridge, but along the Arc. Certainly, that's happening in Buckinghamshire with the expansion of the Disk and the satellite catapult. I think there's a lot of area around Milton Keynes where they've had a kind of development agency mentality for a long time. So it's going to be very interesting.
And this idea of leadership, what's your view moving forward? From our respondents, I must admit, I put down the idea of an elected mayor, so that was quite a good idea, but it doesn't look as if people sort of that receptive to it. Perhaps that's for other reasons.
Well, we've got the devolution bill coming through, and that's going to be interesting. It's quite noisy at the moment on all that. I think for the Arc to be effective, it probably and Bidwell's called for this in their great leadership piece, I think a couple of years ago now, that we needed an Olympic-style delivery body, and everyone said how well that's a bit ahead of its time, and now I think I think there is an appetite for that. I remember going to the event run at the Crick last year. And it was just amazing seeing how many people on the property development side and the investors and all the advisors, and how far ahead of everyone else people were in their interests. And I think that's had a big effect on others. It's to see the volume of organisation that there is on that side is a stimulus to others to work out the leadership. And I think that's coming. We don't quite know what that will look or feel like, but it's certainly going to be a feature of asking for there to be a particular entity as we move forward.
Okay, that's very interesting. And again, I think interestingly, one of the things which David alludes to is this idea of taking the essence, if you like, of Oxford, but how do you make that work in a location which is not in Oxford, ironically? And I think this is an interesting challenge. And I use the analogy of Here East because it's in London, but it's in Stratford. But once you get there, you have this incredible environment, which is really, encourages innovation. And I suppose I think we can see that at Harwell, how that works from a property point of view. I was wondering if there's any other examples, David, and do you agree with me, this idea of trying to create the magic which is Oxford, but to do it in a location which is elsewhere because of land pressures?
Well, I think it's difficult. I don't think it's impossible. And I think I would sort of refer to my earlier comments about, some of the issues around critical mass and so on. I mean, what Near East provides is facilities that are not readily available elsewhere, an attractive environment, and I think it's a place that is able to attract people who want to work there. And this is an important step. We are looking at in Oxford at doing some sort of meanwhile type uses near the station on the Oseney Mead Industrial Estate, as we while we're thinking about what we want to do with that area of land. And there are lots of, there are sort of pretty well tried and tested ways of doing this. There's plenty of experience with, Bruntwood SciTech, for example, in Manchester has done great stuff to keep areas alive and to encourage innovative clusters. So I think there's lots of, there are plenty of good exemplars. I think what is needed is the money, commitment, and leadership. And that's quite often, that can be difficult to to bring together. Doing these things, particularly with our planning system, does require just the most enormous amount of effort. You know, when you're sitting in central government, you kind of think, well, you say let's get this thing done, but actually getting something done requires just incredible amounts of energy, and having the energy in the right place, the right idea, and the money to implement it, having those three available at one time is quite tricky.
Yeah, no, I know, and I appreciate from your previous background, you know some of these things from a personal point of view. We've got a few questions here as we're sort of coming into the final sort of lap, so to speak. One of them is about going back to work and about encouraging people back to work. I partly raised that because I think it's topical. So we've got, has the chaos of COVID-19 created a better environment for collaboration and innovation? That's I think, interestingly, coming back to all of your points, that the answer is yes. Alistair, you were quite adamant that we're in a golden period, I think your words were, which is an interesting concept during the pandemic, but that's okay. And I think we can. I tend to agree the most creative ideas are that. But I just wanted to get some of your views on the other poll, which is, and there's been other questions on this. What is the best environment for collaboration? Sorry, where is the best environment for collaboration and innovation to be found? Work from home. Interestingly, that is the lowest by far, even though all of us at the moment are sitting at home. Office, which is on par with bespoke environment with bells and whistles, which meant, I guess, this idea of a bespoke building, which would encourage that. I mean, for me, that would be somewhere like the Oxford Innovation Sciences building, space, which is at Keble College, which is quite interesting, and it has some of that, and there's other examples along the arc. But I was wondering, Emma, from your point of view, I get the feeling people are coming back to the world. There's no issue about people returning.
It's very much a phased approach, and it's been under constant discussion almost daily. So the plan was to firstly get the lab staff, the health and safety staff back, and to make sure the facilities are working so that ISIS, CLF, etc. are all operating, and then to phase in office staff following that. As far as innovation and collaboration go, some of our events really foster that. So we have a proof of concept program across all of our clusters, which initiate, we've had 44 projects coming through that over the last 3 years. And that has gone right through space, health and energy, new projects. So the initiative I mentioned with Reaction Engines, looking at ammonia as a net zero fuel, came out of that program, and that was all from an event that we ran on site. So I run an annual energy conference every January where we include all of our networks, and we make sure that we get UKRI involved and behind that, and supporting the Science Council and Harwell campus. It is a problem that we're not all together and able to do that, but I think that it can also be an opportunity. So this year we'll have an online conference similar to this. We'll have breakout sessions. We'll be able to, contact individuals for introductions. But I'm hoping that will mean that we can have, link in more to the levelling up agenda and have more people from all over the country. So COVID is an issue, but I think we can also do our best to keep going to foster innovation and collaboration while we get through it.
Okay, that's very helpful. David, from your point of view, anecdotally, obviously, oops, you still there, David?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, we just lost you. Anecdotally, the university has challenges with students coming back and creating bubbles around it. What's your view on this issue of returning to the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, I'm at work at the moment, actually, and I think returning to the workplace is incredibly important. I mean, I think we have to recognize that not everybody feels equally happy about the idea of being at work. And when you are at work, I think you have a responsibility to each other to behave in an appropriate way. So, you know, we are still in a pandemic. There are things we can do to slow down the spread of the disease, and we should clearly do that. But I think there's a limit to the online life. Actually, I think that the longer it goes on, the more difficult it is to have really good collaborative relationships where everybody understands what everybody else is talking about, even if you know each other pretty well. And for new members of staff and junior members of staff, I think the lost opportunity of working with your work colleagues, learning from those around you who have done the job for longer, you know, I think that's an absolutely huge problem. Setting aside the issues around mental health and other forms of health of being in isolation at home and not having workmates and not actually getting out of the house and traveling. So I think we've got to get back to work. That can't be straight away, and I don't think we'll ever work in exactly the same way again. You know, there are very many more efficient ways of doing things online, like we are at the moment, for example, and I'm sure that will persist because we've all learned how to work with it. But I think we've got to get back to the office, back to the lab, back to the factory and workplace, and get going again.
Okay, that's very helpful. And to conclude, Alistair, what's your view on this current issue of getting people back into working environments?
Well, I've received an email saying, please don't come back to your desk until January the 4th. And I'm very happy about that. But I am going to a meeting on Thursday, and I haven't worn shoes since April. So I'm wondering where they are. I do have some sandals. But seriously, I think the connectivity, and we've leapt forward, and so using Teams or whatever it is you use, and being able to have a half-hour meeting with people across different universities, and also bringing in people from overseas, was not readily possible, and we are doing it. We're doing it every day, and I think that's amazing. But I think it should be an integrated part of how we work, and we should take the best forward, because it is lonely and isolating, and if you have a good experience, it's great, and it creates a kind of bloom effect, and you have a good day. But otherwise, it is pretty lonely working at home, and not having a choice. I'd prefer to have the choice about where I work, so I think it is good, but it is also good to have a water cooler and an environment where you bring people together and where ideas flow. And I think that's absolutely part of the collegiate environment at Oxford, and replicated in a clustered environment where people bump into each other, and we're not bumping into each other enough. I'm certainly missing the social contact, and I know others are, and so there is something missing, and it's very interesting to see that. You know, if you said digital online rather than work from home, because it's work is not home, and I think we've lost that kind of that helpful dissociation.
Okay, that's very helpful and very interesting, and I guess one has to do social distancing, bumping into each other, which is the interesting thought. But we're now an hour. It's gone very quick. Thank you to all of you for helping. My apologies for not getting Nick online. It's frustrating. Sorry about that. It was all working, but there we go. So apologies to Nick. He's probably watching now, and to Bart Wilmore. But we will reboot his session, and we'll redo his particular presentation at a later date. So if you could, thank you to all our speakers, to David, Emma, and Alistair for your time. And I'll just do a quick sum up now, and we'll go from there. If you could, thanks very much for joining us, the three of you. And I'll just do a quick sum up now.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot. See you soon. Bye. Thanks, Matthew.
So, okay. Right. Very much for joining us. As I say, once again, apologies to Neil to not getting him online. We will resolve that. What we'll do is do a separate presentation of his work, and then we will send it around to all of you. The slides are excellent, and we'll go from there. So Hugh will be leading the next session at 3 o'clock this afternoon, and on the future of the urban centre. So please do tune into that. And of course, we have the awards this evening, and we are all ready and waiting for that, which will be happening at Bicester Heritage. So I hope you've enjoyed it. There was some philosophical discussion there, but it was important to have that. We were talking about innovation and collaboration, but then we came back to the nuts and bolts about what does it actually look like from a property point of view. And again, it was fascinating to have all those views from that. And I think we're very lucky along the Arc and within Oxfordshire and the Thames Valley to have some fantastic examples and world-leading examples. As someone said to me the other day, we're in the sweet spot, and hopefully long may that last. So on that note, thank you very much for listening, and we will talk very soon, and we'll see you this afternoon. Thank you.